Okay, we are now recording. Thank you very much to Cesar for organizing this and for doing everything that you've done to help with indexing in Peru. My name is Mónica Westin. I work at Google Scholar. I will be presenting in English because I'm sorry to say my Spanish is so bad. And these slides will be in Spanish, and you will receive the slides and recording after the webinar via Concytec. I want to give an overview of what this presentation will go over. I'll begin by describing how the Google Scholar indexing system works, some common OJS indexing problems and suggested fixes, best practices for your OJS journal publishing, and then finally, I will share some Google Scholar indexing guidelines and resources for OJS. At the end of the presentation, I will stop recording. You can unmute your microphone and we will have a conversation and answer questions. I want to begin by describing how the Google Scholar indexing system works. So Google Scholar crawls the entire web looking for scholarly publications all the time. It finds scholarly content, identifies the associated metadata, and groups different versions of items together in Scholar search results. To do this, first a crawler scans the entire web for scholarly items. For all the scholarly items, the indexing system then identifies suitable bibliographic metadata for display in the search results, as you see below. So what does the Scholar indexing system need to find your OJS journal articles and include them properly in Google Scholar search results? I described how it begins by crawling the web. That means first the crawler needs to be able to get all the article URLs, either via browse or via sitemaps. For most instances of OJS, this is set up by default, though I'll get into a few exceptions later. Second, and very importantly for this presentation, in order to identify metadata for the publications it finds, the Scholar system needs access to machine-readable metadata for these items. This machine-readable metadata used by Scholar are called meta tags. They take the form of citation underscore. The image on the right shows a typical set of meta tags. It's taken from our inclusion guidelines, which I'll share with you later. The meta tags in the green box contain familiar bibliographic metadata like author names and publication date. The last meta tag at the bottom in the red box is the meta tag that tells the indexing system the location of the full text version of the article, which should be associated with this metadata. These meta tags are usually automatically built in for OJS journal articles. And you can review the meta tags for your articles yourself. You would do this by going to the landing page for an article, then viewing the HTML source. Usually you can do this by right-clicking the page and selecting View Page Source, or using a keyboard command depending on your browser. Once you're on the HTML source page, which I've shown at the bottom of the screen, you can search for all instances of citation underscore to see the list of meta tags. This process of meta tag review can be used to test and troubleshoot many of the OJS indexing errors that I'll describe in this presentation. When you review the meta tags for an article, you will always want to compare them to the metadata in the PDF of the article. The PDF is considered the version of record. Here you see the PDF of an OJS article to the right of the meta tags for the article. Now these meta tags look really good. Notice that the publication dates, which are both outlined in red for the PDF and for the meta tags, are the same, they match. Also note that because the abstract, which you can see outlined in blue, is written in Portuguese, the Portuguese is also in the meta tags. So you'll see the article title meta tag is written in Portuguese, also outlined in blue. I'll go into more detail about these best practices soon. In particular, I want to mention the publication date meta tag. The publication date meta tag should also match the publication date for the issue in which the article is published, in addition to the PDF. As you see here, volume 13, issue 1 of this journal was published in 2019. The Google Scholar indexing system will check to make sure that the articles within this issue, both the PDFs and the meta tags, have a publication date listed with the year 2019 in the meta tags. I've spent a lot of time talking about bibliographic meta tags already because this is a very common area for errors when it comes to Google Scholar indexing of OJS articles. Indexing in Scholar requires accurate meta tags for the indexing to work. And incorrect metadata will result in unhappy authors and items not being ranked as they should be due to missing citations. The indexing system will automatically detect sites with frequent metadata errors and eventually stops including them. If your OJS journal site has been dropped from the Google Scholar Index, it may be due to frequent metadata errors. There are a few other common causes for OJS indexing errors, such as site outages and other errors that obstruct access to the crawler. I'll discuss these toward the end of the presentation. But I'll turn now to common indexing errors for OJS, which, as I said, are mainly related to metadata. I'm starting with some of the most common errors, the ones that I see almost every day. The first one is incorrect publication dates in the citation date meta tag. The publication date is a crucial piece of metadata for indexing scholarly articles. If the publication date in the citation date meta tag doesn't match the publication date of the issue or the publication date of the PDF, this is a red flag for the indexing system. And here I've created a typical example of what I see most often, which is where the publication date in the meta tag is later than the actual publication date of the item. This suggests that the date the PDF was made available online or uploaded is accidentally being listed as the publication date. There's a known bug for a few different versions of OJS that cause incorrect dates to be listed in the meta tags. If you're using any version of 3.0 or 2.4 in OJS and have widespread date errors in the meta tags across your site, this bug is a likely cause. And I'm going to pause for a second. Please mute your microphone if you've joined us. There's a little bit of noise and I'm recording the webinar.
Por favor, se les recuerda que apaguen sus micrófonos.
Cesar, I will go and look to see if I can mute this. And apologies for the pause. Many people are also joining. Okay, let's see. All right, I have just muted one person. If everyone could take a moment to make sure they're muted, we can continue the presentation. I'm just being picky because we're recording. All right, I'll continue. So as I said, there is a known bug for some versions of OJS that cause this date metadata error. So to test for the problem, you will review the HTML source for your articles to view the date meta tag for articles across your journals. You'll compare these dates with the publication dates listed in the PDFs, as well as the publication date for the issue in which these articles appear. If the problem is widespread across your OJS site and you're currently using one of the OJS versions listed here, there is a patch that's been developed specifically to fix this problem. This patch will ensure that only the publication date is being used in the date meta tag. And this bug is the most common problem for these sorts of OJS errors. So again, you'll find a number of randomly selected articles, both recent and archival. Test to see if the date is incorrect. Most likely you're on one of these versions of OJS and can fix with the patch. The second, maybe most common metadata error problem that we are seeing is meta tags that are dropped in an OJS upgrade. I said at the beginning of the presentation that usually meta tags are enabled by default for OJS. However, there has been a recent widespread issue for some upgrades to newer versions of OJS. In these cases, the Google Scholar plugin that creates meta tags for OJS journals was disabled during upgrade, even if it was enabled on the previous version. If your OJS site has upgraded to any version of OJS listed here in the first bullet point, it's a good idea to check if your journals have been affected by this issue. And the best way to check is to search for the citation title meta tag in the HTML source for a few articles in each of your journals that upgraded. If there's no title meta tag, then you have likely been affected by the disabled plugin issue. There are a few different ways to fix this problem depending on how many journals you publish. Okay.
Monica, I think you need to fix presentation.
Yeah, I noticed it notified me I'm no longer presenting. Let me try to stop presenting and start again. Okay, is that working again?
Yes, it is.
Excellent, thank you. So, and apologies for all of these interruptions this morning. As I said, there is this common error that we're seeing for particular upgrades to OJS. There are a few different ways to fix the issue. If you have only a few number of journals, so that you can make a simple manual adjustment for each journal, that's probably the easiest solution. And I'll walk you through that process on the next slide. Otherwise, if you have so many journals on your OJS site that making a change for each individual journal will take too much time, you can use an SQL command. I included the GitHub link here. And this will adjust your journal's database all at once. Finally, OJS has fixed this bug in versions 3.1.2 and newer. So you could just upgrade to that version of OJS. I do want to show you how to fix the problem manually for your journals. So to enable the Google Scholar plugin manually on a journal-by-journal basis, you'll start by logging into the administrator dashboard for your journal. From the Plugins tab, you'll find the list of generic plugins and check the Google Scholar indexing plugin checkbox. Be sure to save your settings and repeat for every affected journal. And apologies, it says I'm no longer presenting. I'm wondering if this is because we have so many people joining us today. There we go. Okay. A next common problem for OJS journals occurs when multiple languages or scripts are combined in the meta tags for a single article. This results in mixed bibliographic information, and it causes confusion both for the Scholar indexing system and for researchers who may, for example, click on a search result in Google Scholar that seems to be an article written in a familiar language and end up on a PDF they can't read. Similarly, using English as the default language for meta tags, regardless of the language of the article, will also cause problems for indexing. This also results in missed citations because articles that cite the article you see here will likely use the Portuguese title. And so it won't capture your version in the meta tags. Missing citations means articles won't be ranked as they should be in Google Scholar search results. And of course, all of these result in unhappy authors. The fix for both of these issues, multilinguals in the meta tags and using English by default even when it's not the same language, is to use the language of the full text in the PDF as a guide for the language to use in entering the metadata for a publication. Don't duplicate this information in different languages or scripts within a single field. And by the way, this also applies if you have, say, the full text of an article is in Spanish, but you have an abstract in Spanish and English. You would use Spanish for the full text, even if you have the abstract in a few different languages. When author names and the citation author meta tags don't match the author names in the published PDF, this is another red flag for the indexing system. Here in the red meta tags, you see a few different examples of common author name errors, all of which will break indexing. In the first meta tag, notice that the author's first name and last name have been inverted through introducing a comma in this case. In the second, only part of the author's name has been entered. And in the last, a lowercase spelling has been used for the author's name. All of these will cause indexing errors. To troubleshoot and fix, compare author names in the author meta tags with author names in the PDF. If you see discrepancies, adjust the meta tags to match the format of this PDF again, which is considered the version of record. And always keep a close eye on first name, last name format and capitalization. Now a few errors that are not related to metadata that we still see quite often. One is an invalid HTTPS certificate, and this goes beyond OJS sites. We see this for a number of sites from time to time. Indexing HTTPS sites requires a valid server certificate. An invalid certificate effectively blocks the crawler from accessing the site, and thus forces the indexing system to remove the site from crawling as a result. To test, open the URL for an article from one of your journals in a few different browsers, and see whether you see any messages about the connection not being private. If so, you will need to work with a certificate provider to resolve this issue. Finally, the last common problem is hacked sites that are returning spam to the crawler. We've seen this quite a lot recently, so I want to include this as well. The Google Scholar indexing system has identified almost 150 OJS sites that have been hacked and used for commercial spamming, and that was only in 2019. These OJS sites often don't look hacked to journal managers and end users, as articles load normally in the browser. However, the crawler for both Google Scholar and Google Web Search is receiving links to spammy pages instead of the journal content. The indexing system is forced to drop these hacked sites. To test whether your site has been hacked, you'll need to emulate the crawler to see what it sees by setting your user agent to Googlebot. Then you can check URLs for a number of articles across your journal to see if they return anything other than the article page that you see in the browser. If you see issues, alerting your hosting provider is a good first step. Or if you're running a university site, a webmaster or an IT person in the library or your university should know how to diagnose and fix this. They should be able to fix rather the underlying security issues. Next, we also recommend posting to the PKP community forum to share the situation with others and ask for assistance if needed. It would be good to see if others may have had similar problems and potential solutions, depending on how they installed their OJS instance. With that, we've covered a large portion of indexing errors that tend to affect OJS journals. And in the next 5 minutes or so, before we turn to questions, I want to describe some best practices for OJS publishing that will help ensure your articles are as well indexed as possible. One common question that I get about Google Scholar indexing is whether OJS journals need to register their OJS site in order to be indexed. The answer is no. The Scholar crawler automatically scans the entire web for scholarly articles. It may occasionally take a bit of time, but it will eventually find your OJS journals. However, you can ensure that your journals are indexed as quickly and well as possible by using the standard OJS structure that the Scholar indexing system has learned to recognize. OJS does allow customization of URL paths, and some journals use this. But customizing URLs makes it harder for the crawler to identify OJS-based journals, so we recommend against customizing the site. And at the bottom, this link, you see a standard OJS site. The Google Scholar indexing system knows this is an OJS site. When it finds it, it will immediately start to index this journal because it knows that it is a scholarly publication using OJS. If your OJS site migrates to another domain or subdomain, or articles are renumbered or given new identifiers, it's important to minimize broken links as much as possible. This means setting up redirects at the article level, from the previous URL for that article to the new URL for that article, and not just redirecting all the old articles to the homepage of the new site. So these would be permanent HTTP 301s. And here you see an example at the bottom. Again, you will have these slides after the presentation, and you can actually go to the first link and notice that it redirects to the article on the new domain. This ensures no gaps in indexing, no broken links, no drops in Google Scholar. Another best practice during migrations is to keep the old site functional and live while the new site is being developed. This avoids interruptions in access both for researchers and the indexing system. When the new site is ready to go live, first put the article level redirects in place, then change the DNS lookup to the new server. And this leads to the last couple of slides, which are focused on avoiding outages more generally. And I thought I would actually illustrate what happens when sites are down for Google Scholar. Whenever your site is down, it doesn't just cause problems for researchers trying to access your publications, and they'll end up on dead pages in search results. It also prevents the indexing system from crawling these pages. In general, try to avoid keeping your site down for more than a few hours to lower the chances that the crawler will be trying to find your publications while they're inaccessible. Repeated site outages can obstruct indexing. And again, this is if it's only for a few hours, but it's repeated over and over. Here you see a real example from the Google Scholar crawl logs that shows a journal site that was intermittently down over a period of days. Notice that after this happens for a couple of weeks, and it looks like after about 10 days, the crawler visits the page less frequently and starts to give up on indexing the site. And then the more extreme case where you have extended outages can lead the indexing system to believe that your site is completely inactive. If your site has been down for extended periods of time, it's possible that it has been dropped from the index entirely. So before we turn to questions, I want to end by directing you to a few really useful references and guidelines about Google Scholar. The first is the online Google Scholar documentation. If you go to scholar.google.com and click Help on the lower right corner of the page, you'll be taken to our documentation. From there, the section titled Inclusion will provide a comprehensive overview of the indexing process. I also recommend a slide deck from a presentation that our founder Anurag gave at Open Repositories Conference a few years ago. It's targeted to repository platforms but gives good general guidelines for indexing best practices. And finally, I shared the community forum link before. The creators of OJS, the Public Knowledge Project, have set up a community forum where you can post specific questions that others using the platform may have encountered. I'm going to stop recording now and we'll turn to questions. I also want to make sure everyone who attended this webinar has my email. So I've put it on the last slide. And I will now stop recording.